Hello, everybody. We are live on Tuesday night. It's the Dr. Boz Show. I am a good almost 60 hours into my fast with a glucose of 78 and ketones of 2.2. Welcome to the Tuesday night where we have a great show for you tonight. Really a continuation of a show that started 3 weeks ago when we shared one of my coaches that helps me teach about how to do keto living had been struggling with some life. How do we feel healthy? How do I get ready for the next class? When she said, I'm going to do this thing that I did a while back, which is just take out everything from my diet, just eat sardines. And the last time she did this was 2022, where she did it for 30 days. But this time she got to the end of 30 days and said, wow, I just feel really good. And whether it's her years as a naval officer that said, I'm just going to keep eating this one thing, this kind of boring diet of sardines only because I feel good. And we shared that story with you 3 weeks ago on some of the things that we know that she benefited from, what happened to her. And since then, at the time of the show, we had ordered these labs but didn't have them back. And many of you wrote in and said, you know, Doc, this doesn't sound safe. I'm not sure that it's a good idea for you to have somebody have sardines for that many days in a row. And several of you, with all the good intentions, said, hey, Joe Rogan did this a couple of years ago, and he had arsenic poisoning from his sardines. His habit was 2 to 3 cans a day for a while, and he said, I went and got tested and I was having arsenic poisoning. Because I watched your comments, I read them all. You kept pointing out that Joe Rogan had this problem with his arsenic levels after sardines. But I'm here to tell you that as I look through the medical literature to find, well, where is the problem with sardines? Where is the link, that the evidence that this is truly a problem? I contend that there's only one scientific article that I found. The year from it was, I think, 2021, where a man in Saudi Arabia he suspected arsenic poisoning, went into his primary care physician, said, I think I have arsenic poisoning. And by the way, I eat a lot of canned fish. Indeed, his arsenic was elevated, but there were several other reasons why it might be. And everyone in his family had an elevated arsenic. Further testing showed that his arsenic type of poisoning was an inorganic kind, the kind that it was an organic kind, and something that doesn't need to be treated. You can go ahead and look at the show notes to find that specific article, but the punchline was his personal report of arsenic poisoning and linking it to sardines was in the literature, but he also had several symptoms of what arsenic poisoning can do. Having a chronic headache, change in skin color, and our patient, my coach, the person that we're using as a teachable case for tonight, well, she doesn't have any of those symptoms. But starting out with her health issues, many years ago, she had severe insulin resistance. And as she has adopted this way of eating, the ketogenic diet, she really has improved her health. She has not only lost weight and then, struggled like many of us, put a few pounds back on, but as she journeyed through these last 90 days with only eating sardines, we're not only going to go through her lab results, but some of the other things that improved in her, not to mention that she lost 35 pounds in her journey. And my gosh, can you just see the glow? This is a picture from her. She's driving across the country this last week. And here's a picture saying, no, I feel great. I feel great. So we're going to start by talking about what is it that arsenic poisoning has all of your attention for. We're going to go through some of her reports, show you what her lab results have taught me, and lead to maybe a few conclusions about what I should care about, what you should care about when it comes to what I call an elimination diet, but also is the subtext of what we learn from eating only sardines. All right, so I am having a little pucker up in my drink tonight. So for those of you that I don't need any extra ketones, but as I start the show out with 2.2, I'll try to remember to test at the end of the show to show you what they do. While I continue to talk to you about it, I am watching your questions. Those of you that have questions about not just arsenic poisoning and the other heavy metals that we have tested our patient for, but hopefully you've got some better questions about what's the point of this? Why would you do this? I want to first start by showing off her fingernails. If you Google what happens with arsenic poisoning, there is actually a classic response from our fingernails that will have lines across them. When you look at the amount of growth in these fingernail pictures are from today. When you look at the growth of her fingernails over the last 90 days, it's about half the distance of a fingernail. And so you can see in that slide I was just showing that her fingernails look lovely. They are not diseased in any way or giving me any signals of an arsenic poisoning. But more importantly, she feels amazing. She says, I have great energy. I really have had a few times in my life where there was more health problems than I want to admit. But in the last, short time over the last 90 days, not only has her energy been good, but her sleep has been better. We're going to talk through some of the other things that I specifically asked questions about, well, her poop, her stool. Because I have some questions that I know I am learning from this case. And I have several other people who, well, it's not the first person that's done a sardine challenge. It is the first person I've ever seen do it for 90 days. And all of your intentions of telling me that she's at danger for this toxicity, I just want you to have a conversation with her to see how vibrant she looks after 90 days. Let's start by diving into her labs a little closer. I think this is going to be the best one for that. So the first thing I like to point out is how can I prove she did it? So let's start by looking at that omega-3 along the top there. The omega-3 index is a measurement of a specific type of fat that is in high density in small little fish. These are your omega-3s, and when your doctor tells you to eat more fish, specifically what they're trying to get you to eat more of is this polyunsaturated fat called an omega-3 fat. With that finding, the way you measure an omega-3 is a specific test that really looks back over the 90 days. So the way we do that is we look at the skin of your red blood cells. So this is supposed to be a bunch of red blood cells, and they're kind of disc shaped. So they're like the outer tire is a little more plump than the inner part. And when you look at the skin of red blood cells, you can find that it's made up of trans fats, it's made up of saturated fats, it's made up of omega-6s and then omega-3 polyunsaturated fats. It's those omega-3s that when we send these red blood cells through the machine to look for, well, what percentage of those fats are out there, that we learn about the fats inside the absorption, like did she absorb them all, and did she get them all the way to her bone marrow and then make her red blood cells out of these same kind of fats. I want to just hop over here to the let's see here, without giving away the answer here, I want to make sure I center this before I show you guys. Well, I think I can go back to the slide. It's going to be easier if I do that. Let's go back 2 slides. So if we look at this slide here, okay, you'll see that her omega-3 has a in September of 2022, she does way better than me. I don't know if how often she was eating sardines in September. It was right after our first 21-day metabolic kick that she helped coach with. And so she'd been great. She followed the rules. She had a tribe of people helping to improve her metabolism along the way. And I suppose being a coach along that journey also helped her. So at the end of that, her percentage of fats within those red blood cells that were the omega-3 is 9.7. She noticed that after the 21 day though, that's when her first time she did 30 days of only eating sardines. And she's really struggled, like many of us, that the variability of food tempts us to have more. By taking food away and decreasing the variability on a menu, it actually is a really healthy thing for people who have addiction to food. I mean, we all eat food, but there's a difference in addiction to food. I don't know if I could say that was her struggle, but she just felt the clarity when she took away the noise in her brain about food. And at the end of her sardine challenge there, she sent off an omega-3, and now her omega-3s were up to 12.7. Now, let me just compare that to mine. My omega-3, I'm a flatlander from South Dakota. So the first time I checked it, it was 4%, which is like terrible, terrible. I didn't eat enough fish to help my earlobe repair. It was very low omega-3. But I'm the norm in the country. We know that if you can get that omega-3 above 7, especially into the 8, wow, you have a protective factor for heart disease. I mean, even if you're headed to the hospital in the midst of a heart attack, we have evidence that the higher that omega-3, the better you are able to survive that because of that protective effect of an omega-3 oil. And again, best place to get it is a little bitty fish. So there you go. So after that challenge though, she went back to her normal life. By September of 2023, last year at this time, she got done with that, the class again, checked her omega-3s, and by golly, it was right back to her, I guess you could call it baseline. But after 90 days, in fact, we sent in her omega-3 at 80 days, 81 days or something. I called the company to say, have you ever seen an omega-3 with 22% of the omega-3s present in those red blood cells? And they said, yeah, we actually get a once a week or so, we'll get somebody that's in their 20s. So I thought it would be this anomaly that they'd never seen before, but not true. She had 22% of her omega-3s present in her red blood cells. But so that there you go to say, yes, she did that. We can prove that she took it. Not only do we care that she had high omega-3s, but her average amount of sardines was between 3 and 4 cans per day. And, I spoke, I texted her earlier today and she's like, there were a few days where she fasted and just didn't, or maybe only had 1 can. But for the better part of 90 days, she says, minus a couple of meals where brisket was all she could, she joined in on. It was completely 3 months of only sardines. This picture is just to show, yes, that's those skin layers of what your fats are made up of. The more of those fish that you could find, that's where she has now 22% of her red blood cells are aligned with that. So here's one of the punchlines that when we looked at her, not just her lead, but also looking at arsenic and mercury, the 3 heavy metals that we look for when we worry about toxicity. Came back last week showing that her lead level was normal at 1.6. Her arsenic was in the normal level at 4, and her mercury was 1.6. I do take just a minute to unpack that a little bit. When you look at the reason for the arsenic fear, again, I think there's a lot of headlines out there about what happens when arsenic poisoning is going on. The patients are very symptomatic. So, I mean, I'd never seen anybody eat that many sardines either. So I didn't have overwhelming fear of that. But it was nice to, when I did ask her questions like, how do you feel? Is there any skin changes, specifically a darkening of your skin? What do your fingernails look like? When you're looking at arsenic poisoning in the acute setting, like you think someone's poisoning you in the last 3 or 4 days, you can get a urine test. But if the arsenic has been going in steadily for 3 months, you want to look at a blood test. And a blood test that's positive is in the high, multiple dozens, like 50s to 100. So to have a number of 4 is very good. The other fear that I had more of, and maybe it's because I've had babies and I've had people bring this up way more, why don't you want to have fish? And again, I was never somebody in love with fish either, but by golly, it really does change. We're going to go through some of the changes that happen in her, not just her toxicity number there that was normal, but what else happened to her body. Mercury is probably better published than anything else. That the mercury level, the first pushback that I hear about when I suggest people eat fish more often is, well, in pregnancy, they said I was only supposed to eat, 1 or 2 cans of that a week. That was going to hurt my baby to have a higher level of sardines because of the mercury level. And that is mythical as well. When you look into the science behind mercury, the amount of mercury, first of all, in a little fish is very small, but even tuna or something that has a higher degree of mercury is a massive amount of that in a week in order to have any impact on the patient. So I know that those are out there, and I know that there is, there's fear, and then is it appropriate fear or not appropriate fear? And I contend that there's a lot of people who push into the reasons why they don't want to do something such as our patient has done. But I want to show you a couple other benefits. So the first thing I asked her about was, was there anything else you took precautions for? And she said, well, I've struggled over the years with my vitamin D level. So here's a list going back to 2017 for her vitamin D level. 18, very low for vitamin D. We want that to be much higher than that. But then as she really tries to get this higher, it took supplementing with a K2D3 for her to get that one in September of 2019, where it was 108. And although you say, oh, it's never supposed to be above 100, I contend there was more going on in this woman's life than just the lack of consumption of vitamin D, although that clearly made a difference with it. What she settles into in 2020, 2021, and 2022, and now at the end of this, in 2024, she has another, her highest level ever at 149. What's interesting is she said, I've had really good numbers of vitamin D before I started this sardine thing. So I knew that there was vitamin D in sardines, so I just stopped taking it. So from September of 2023, last year, and then some health problems throughout the past year. The reason she started on this sardine challenge, which she thought was going to be a month, but now has turned into 3 months. The reason she started on it was because she had put on 25-ish pounds eating a carnivore only diet. And if you noticed on those pictures I showed you at the beginning, she has a history of being very insulin resistant, really putting weight on around her middle, having that visceral fat, and then a consequence of several other things that, well, we talk about in class, where we say, well, that's a consequence of a high insulin diet. High insulin during whatever diet you're doing. So let me show you this. I'll get out of the way here. So for example, here is a image where you can see the man and you can see how much adipose tissue he has stacked on top of his muscle mass. When people swallow a fat soluble vitamin, the insulin, the high insulin state, pushes it to be stored in their fat. This happens not just for fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin D, but it also is a consequence of other fat-soluble vitamins, like the estrogen is supposed to stand for, the pink ones are estrogen with the E on it, and the T is testosterone, both fat-soluble vitamins. But when insulin is high, those fat-soluble vitamins get stored in your fat cells. They listen to the dictator of insulin. And only when you lower that insulin are you able to then start mobilizing. This is what insulin looks like when it's healthy. It unlocks the ability for that fat cell to mobilize its nutrients. And I've seen this several times where we checked their vitamin D over the course of a month, 4 or 5 times, as they really stuck to a strict ketogenic diet, lowering their insulin. They weren't taking more vitamin D, but their vitamin D levels went up because of this mobilization of the fat. So we had a discussion this morning, excuse me, in my 21-day, or in my Pin Chasers meeting. That's my version of a support group. I host it here free in Tampa. If you're ever in Tampa on a Tuesday at 8 o'clock, there's a party room, a birthday party room with the bowling alley that we rent and have anybody want to come and ask questions. We not only answer your questions, but hopefully you'll become part of the community. It says being on a ketogenic diet can be difficult. We try to provide a community here in Tampa, and we encourage people to do that in their own neck of the woods. So looking at this chart, though, I remind people that the vitamin D, when it is locked up, when you go back to that list, that the vitamin D was very tiny at the beginning, 18, and then she is able to see it rise over the course of several years under that. Let me do this website one. Actually, I think I can do it this way. Don't run away. I almost have it figured out. No, not that one. This one. That's not right either. Hold on. Oh, website. That was right there in front of me. Okay, here we go. So this is her vitamin D, where at the beginning, 18, 22. In that zone, what her body was sacrificing is, well, a whole bunch of proteins are missing when that vitamin D is low. I mean, this happens for testosterone as well, but I really like this imagery. So that vitamin D is going to come into this cell, and this cell happens to be supposed to be a white blood cell. And that vitamin goes into the mitochondria. The mitochondria then converts it into the active form of vitamin D. It gets transported into a nucleus, and then that nucleus transcribes proteins out of that white blood cell, in this case, to help fight off infection. But that same problem happens in every one of the patients who, over time, has watched their body lose function because the insulin resistance was not. I mean, they didn't understand how much that high insulin state was crippling everyone. Their brain wasn't working well, their heart wasn't working well, these white blood cells weren't working well. So this morning we had a discussion at the Pin Chasers about, well, what was the difference between someone like our patient? I keep trying really hard not to say her name. Like our patient who didn't fast, but instead ate sardines. And that really comes down to somebody who is insulin resistant. Why is a sardine fast, in my mind, a better option for this woman than a solid fast? And it really comes down to watching what blood sugars will do in the course of fasting, and what they'll do in the course of a sardine challenge. That blood sugar will do a very similar pattern when they stop eating, and it might even be a little higher when they are eating sardines. The difference is the access the patient has to fat cells. So the reason I wanted to show you the mobilization of that fat when the insulin went down, when she goes on that sardine challenge, the insulin really decreases and allows that mobilization of fat-based hormones. Well, I can measure those, right? I can watch those activate and be in circulation pre-sardine challenge and post-sardine challenge. But But the message there should be, well, if you can't activate the fat soluble vitamin that was stuck in the fat cell, it's because you also couldn't activate and mobilize the fat. Why? Because you had such high insulin for so long. So when I take an insulin resistant patient and they come to me and say, I'm just going to do your fasting thing, I'm like, I would not be doing that. Your body has a couple of rules that have now been settled in, and they are hardcore wired into your fat cells. They are in the pathology stage of this disease. And you can't do what you could have done at 15 before the insulin resistance had been there for several decades. And this is a great example of it. Let me show you this slide that says, here's what happens during just a 72-hour sardine challenge. And what we're looking for in this slide is to show you autophagy is one way to think of it. When I look at, had this woman had said, I'm just going to do a water fast, and I mean, people could fast for 90 days. Let's just say she's going to do it for 72 hours. Let's give it a week. Let's have her do a fast for a week. Because of that high insulin state that she's had for such a long period of time, she will not get the activation of her fat. She will not mobilize fat as readily as she's able to do it in a sardine challenge. Let me show you the slide. I got to get my head out of the way. Okay, here we go. So in this one, you can see that the days along the bottom would be day 1, day 2, day 3. She really starts eating sardines on day 2, and you can see her glucose doesn't bounce as high. Glucose is in red and the ketones were in blue. When you look at that autophagy, how much of her cells is she able to like activate and mobilize in those 72 hours? The first day, her Dr. Boz ratio was 150. And so not that great. In part, she's been doing this a while. She has had a lower production of ketones, and her access to fat is locked behind the fat cells. When she swallows fat, which is what happens in a sardine challenge, for the time that fat is en route, it can be used as a resource for energy. And especially when you drop that glucose down. Now, it dropped down enough to feel hungry. It dropped down enough for the patient usually to notice, but not down enough to open up a fat cell. That insulin resistance is where patients get stuck. Doc, I swear to God, I'm not eating. I'm like, I know that's part of the problem. But when I eat, I gain weight. I'm like, well, what you're eating and how to shift that chemistry, this is an exact example of why it would be so important for a patient to recognize the limitations you have when you eat nothing versus when you eat sardines. So, okay, 150 is what happened the first day. By 24 hours in, that glucose is lower and the ketones are higher. This, again, is this self-perpetuating process. When that ketone, when that fat can en route gets converted into either free fatty acids and you burn it as energy, or you use it as ketones, the circulation of those ketones produces more ketones out of the liver. So it starts a process, it starts a motor, it starts revving up her metabolism. And by the end of that sardine challenge, on right before day 4, right before she starts eating other meals, her Dr. Boz ratio is down to 44, which really is a reflection that she is now producing ketones better than she's probably produced them in a long time. When I look at 90 days of that, the other benefits that I think are worthy of mentioning is what happened to her. Oh, the other benefits that I think are worthy of pulling your attention to is what happens to her stool. Okay, so I texted her today and said, okay, some of the other benefits that I've seen when people do an extended elimination diet, which is the other word for this, have to do with, well, number one, if I'm trying to repair a bowel, if there is a leaky gut or Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, some of the very significant malnourishment issues that go on, I'm gonna take them down to one food. Especially over the last 5 years, the one food is often sardines. They don't do as well as they give up before I mean, I've never had anybody go this long, so I'm super excited for this information. But one of the improvements is that at first you're training the gut to absorb better. When I look back at the first time she did this, the first 30 days that she said, I'm just going to do sardines only. I can't believe how good I feel. It takes the noise out of my brain, and we're going to do an elimination diet. And when she asked me about that, I said, one of the privileges of interviewing people that are over 100 years old, so centenarians who have cognitive function. I mean, they're not demented, they're not in a nursing home, they're living their life over the age of 100. Is I've asked them, what do you eat? And their menus are very limited. It is boring. It's like, that's it. That's all you eat. I mean, very little variability in their menu. And this is my anecdotal. These are my patients that I've asked that question to. And I've just always been fascinated by, wow, they don't get this desire and pleasure from the random, food, but they're doing something right. Anyway, so she said, yeah, I don't mind taking that away. But the first time she did that, she got constipated. In fact, she stopped at the end of 30 days because she's like, my stools didn't move. So as she did it this time, she said, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of MCT to all of my meals. So if you go back, and you look at this, you can see that she started in, these are some of the ones in June where her fasting glucose and her ketones led to, a Dr. Boz ratio in the 30s and the 20s and the 30s. And you can just see she did a really good job of sticking to the rhythm. And what she said is it took about a month before she stopped having loose stools associated with that MCT. That at first, it was 2 or 3 times a day that she would have loose stools, which is very common in a gut that's leaking. It's also very common in a gut that's not it's not in shape to absorb that much fat. And about the 3rd week on this, she said, my gosh, it was great. My stools went back to about, her normal rhythm is about every other day. During the time when she was, she would have loose stools, the stools would float. I want to go back to here. The stools would float, meaning there's probably some fat in them. And then the next phase of what happened to her stools is there was just a little bit of scant debris in there. She's like, it's weird. There's very low volume. It's like my body has learned how to absorb every stinking part of that fish. And I said, that's actually a good sign. In the last month, she says, now I'm back to what I think of as normal, is I have a bowel movement about every other day. There is no looseness. They do not float. And I, this might be TMI, but when people have healthy bowel movements, it's associated with a generalized positive feeling. There's plenty of jokes I'm sure you can make around that. The point I'm making is that when you look at a side effect of reducing the inflammation inside somebody who's had insulin resistance for a long time, is over the last month and a half, her bowels are back to working normal. They are not, she's not having, the flushing or the dumping syndrome that can happen when people have fat malabsorption. And I contend some of her other health problems that were stacking up in the background not only have to do with the improvement of mobilizing her fat-based hormones, but also extracting the nutrition out of her food. She's now doing it at a much more efficient level, like closer to a teenage level or a 20-year-old they do a really good job of extracting nutrients. Their gut is really efficient. When we age, especially when we age in the setting of a high insulin or high inflammation, you can find that it's not as good. And that's where things like the B12 gets lower, the vitamin D gets lower. And you say, well, I'll just supplement them. I'm like, but the problem is the gut. And when you watch her story and see how much that improved that. All right, so there are several of you who have written in and said, okay, and I even see your questions here. We're going to get to your questions next, but I am going to preemptively strike here because the last time I talked about this, you guys all wrote in, is it safe? And that's why we checked the heavy metals to say, yes, it is safe. And then this is an elimination diet. What should, how do you start that? How do you stick to that? And how do you do that? And I would say that if you've ever tried to do that, in fact, if you have tried to do this, a sardine challenge, I would love to see the comments in the chat to ask, did you try it with a tribe or without a tribe? And I will tell you that I had heard several patients had turned in their spreadsheet, probably about 4 of them before I said, all right, I'm going to try to do this. And I did it with my mom the first time. Like, okay, Mom, I know I've told you to do this, but I want to do it and I just don't want to do it alone. So we did it together. What I want to show you is that if you have ever wanted to walk hand in hand with how to do a sardine challenge, especially followed by what I think should be next is to see how well did your metabolism change during that. This is where our patient learned this, and this is where I've become so thankful for the students who have signed up and done this course with me. Our 21-day course starts on September 9th. Don't get the dates mixed up. On September 9th. Classroom closes on Friday of this week. So we have a few seats left. I'm super excited to see how well our sales have gone. I'm going to show you that under courses, if you pick that 21-day metabolic kick, this class is not open during all parts of the year. Right now, it's open. If you wonder what you're signing up for, it is a commitment, but this is how you learn about how to metabolically change. Looking back at those pictures of our patient, knowing that she really, I think I said her name 3 weeks ago, so I can just say it again. This is Jane, one of my coaches. And if you watch Jane's health story, she knew what to do. She's actually a counselor and advises other people. But walking through the story on how do you make a change and stay with it? When you do it with a tribe, when you do this under the coaching of a physician watching you, as well as through the friendships that happen inside the small groups that we create in this course, I contend it's the best thing that I've done in medicine in 25 years. I highly encourage you to take a close look at this calendar. The calendar has not only just a overview outline, but it shows you that there is 1 hour per day. And when you sign up for the course, you get to select which hour fits your life because it's live. It's your support group. It's where there is no recording. You need to show up live for this. My check-in, my morning huddle that I begin every day with is at 8:30 in the morning Eastern time, and that gets recorded. Now, the recordings disappear in 30 days, so you don't have an eternity to watch it. But we want you dialing in and committing the time because we know that mindset that we really work on to help people through something that they think they can't do on their own. And then you'll notice those words in blue are the core lectures. Those are pre-recorded. I think they're the best lectures I've ever put together. But there are 5 of them altogether, and really an impressive process. So usually the questions that come, and I've seen a few of them in the chat already, are, what if I'm going to miss a day? Like any classroom, if you miss a day, it's not great, but it's your class. The more consistent you can be, the better. It's not an uncommon problem that out of the 21 days, students might need to miss a day or so in that. And that's about as much as I would encourage. If they're going to miss more than 5 days, I would say don't commit to it till you're ready. But I do highly encourage you to look at these videos. They show you other patients who have reversed their medical problems. We only do this class twice a year. The door will close in a few short days. And I truly encourage you to read the reviews of the other students because they don't say it nearly as well as, I don't say it nearly as well as they do. All right. You will, if you are on our email list, you'll be getting another couple of emails from us, reminding you when that classroom closes. All right. We have about 20 minutes for questions, which is what I was hoping for. I'm going to hop over there and get those ready. I do want. Okay, so these are the questions I thought were going to come. So the questions are centering around what happens when you start a sardine challenge, and what do you think is going to happen to this woman after she. I mean, okay, so it's safe. I've proven that she doesn't need she doesn't have lead or arsenic or mercury in her blood. But isn't this just a gimmick? Like, what happens when somebody eats only one thing? And I would contend that the reason Jane is doing this is in part that it's easier for her. Her brain isn't distracted by other foods. The satiety happens where she's not, chasing food. But also there was a few health problems where she's been, I asked her today, how are they doing? And she's like, I cannot believe how much better several of these problems are. And again, having to do with some core inflammation and how well her body's immune system can respond when asked to help her. So you say, well, can she just stay on sardines forever? I don't know that that's the best advice. But it's a great nutrient-dense food where the volume of food is not as high. All really helpful things for somebody who's trying to reverse insulin resistance. But in an elimination diet, whenever we're doing that and we say, okay, now how do we get them back to the normal side? How do we get them back to a balanced side? The first thing I would contend is in somebody who's had what I would say food addiction, a food that hijacks all of their thoughts, and they can take the noise away with that one food, one type of food. And then we say, all right, now the next step is to add one more food that you like. And so Jane actually texted me that she had brisket on her travels across the country, as her friends gathered around a very, famous barbecue place, and the smell and the relationships were there. And Jane was able to focus on the relationships, focus on the humans, not so much the food. But then as she added another food back to her, I think she said she's had 2 meals of brisket in the last 90 days. And it's really been in the last week where she's saying, if I add food back, what does that look like? She feels very safe in this one food only. And my goodness, she's had such a relief of her medical problems. But what does it look like to get back to a more varied diet? And how varied should you have it? And I contend the answer to that is based on her behavior. So if she adds back brisket, 3 times a week, and she feels satisfied from it, and she doesn't find herself overeating when she eats that, then stay there for 2 weeks, 3 times a week, brisket. And then the next thing she adds back is, I don't know, she was carnivore before, so maybe chicken wings. And if she adds back chicken wings and she said, I just found myself wanting more and more and more and more food, that food was really hard for me to say no to. I don't think that's going to happen, but it's amazing. You don't know until you try these things. If that happens and she finds herself flooding into too much food, that would be a place to say, all right, back up, try a different one and add back. Again, when I look at the centenarians, it was like a dozen foods that they eat in their life. So do not feel like, oh my gosh, in order to be normal, I have to have this really wide, range of variable foods. That's not true. What you do need is the satisfaction from food. She's clearly getting great nutrients without supplements right now. And my goodness, she feels good. The stool was one part of the story. The sleep was the other part of the story that I was very impressed to say, wow, her sleep is doing better and her ability to focus for her job is doing better. She was also the one that had the Achilles heel, that plantar fasciitis that was disrupting her work because it was so much pain, and the pain from that has stayed away. All right, let's go back to the questions because I almost pre-read this one for you. All right, Tom writes in and said, what is the best time of day to take a supplement if you're following OMAD and fasting to avoid stomach upset? Well, so I would ask Tom, what supplements are you taking? Most supplements I would have you take with the meal. the supplements in a, so if you say, I only eat once a day, it's in that time where I put the food in. What if I would put the supplements in at the same time. If it says, oh, you should take the supplement in the morning, I would, well, maybe your eating window needs to be in the morning if that's the case too. I have found though, that the eating window of one meal a day, if you push that to instead of thinking one meal per day, I mean, especially if that person is over the age of 50, over the age of 60, that the absorption of the food in one meal per day, they have a tougher time getting that extraction. And so I would push that eating window to start at like 3 hours with a little meal at the beginning, like a can of sardines at the beginning, and then a meal at the end. And somewhere in there is where I put the supplements. All right, Rachel writes in and says, should people with a high uric acid do a sardine challenge, purines, as they start their journey into keto? Or would they wait for the uric acid to go down? You'll be waiting years, Raquel. Sardines are again, one of the punchlines that I try to make sure people hear when I talk about sardines and uric acid is the biggest impact on uric acid is what is your blood sugar. One of my favorite parts of Jane's story is that her blood sugar numbers in her continuous glucose monitor are like as flat as the plains of South Dakota. Just like there's just no wiggle. They are flat. That's how you reverse uric acid. You get the blood sugar down and keep it down. When people say, boy, I don't want to have, and then fill in the blank because it might raise the uric acid, that is a drop in the bucket. There's purines in sardines, so then you're going to raise uric acid. The most common way people are making increased uric acid is that their blood sugars hang out above 100, I mean, especially above 120, and they take that fructose, that glucose is turned into fructose, and the fructose is turned into uric acid. That's where the massive amount comes from. In order to lower the uric acid, they need to get the blood sugar low and not binge and not relapse. They need to keep that blood sugar stable, stable, stable. It's a good question, though. I get that a lot at the Pin Chasers. I've answered that several times. So Pin Chasers is not recorded, so you wouldn't know that. But so good question for here. Katrina says, what else was consumed besides sardines? And what were the energy levels first starting out? Yeah, so she struggled like I think a lot of people do in the ketogenic entrance, which is even though she'd been carnivore, either the volume of food was so high or the fat wasn't high enough to get her, to really reverse what was going on inside the bowel, and that was in part draining her energy. But I contend when people have that high insulin level, they can only get fuel from glucose. The fat is hidden under the insulin blanket, which means their fat cells are the first to become insulin resistant, the first to tuck the fat inside and not let it mobilize. And unfortunately, their energy levels spiral downward and don't find that that relief, because just like I was saying, that if Jane would have done a fasting only, it would have been probably far into the second week before some of those fat cells would have mobilized and opened up. That's not normal. Normal people would have opened their fat cells within 48 hours, 72 hours at the longest. But when I see people who said, I'm doing the ketogenic diet, I'm doing the carnivore diet, and I can't seem to lose weight, or I'm putting on weight and I'm on the carnivore diet, it means the insulin is so high. Their beta cells have been putting out too much insulin for multiple decades. And in order to undo that, it has to be a flat sugar, a stable sugar that goes down and down and down and down. As the insulin comes down, that mobilization of fat delivers energy. And I think that is probably the biggest trap patients have prior to being on a ketogenic diet, or even trying the ketogenic diet, but they do it in a way where they hop to fasting too quickly before they've got the ability to mobilize fat. And there's a lot of ways to learn that. There's a lot of, you can see that in their results. You can see that in their numbers. And it is, inside the 21 day, I visit every room, several times. I review every morning with the coaches. Do you have a student that's concerned? Should I be visiting your classroom to check on a student? And we do that for all 21 days, all 3 weeks. That attention, though, has allowed such a condensed learning curve for me to watch for the patterns that, they're making too much insulin. And I mean, you can see it when they are pricking their finger and they show us the glucose and ketone first thing in the morning. But you can watch the pattern by the people who get so fatigued or start to put on weight on a carnivore diet or a keto. I'm going to put that in quotes because a ketogenic diet means you've got ketones in circulation. But most people who are putting on weight on a ketogenic diet aren't making ketones. That's the problem. And they need the fat. I mean, that's what Jane was doing. She was able to swallow the fat, turn that fat into energy when it was en route. As soon as the insulin gets a hold of it, it's going to put it right where it put that vitamin D. It's going to put it right where it put that estrogen and testosterone in a fat cell. And when you're insulin resistant, it's locked there. That's the unfortunate part. Well, I actually think there might be something wrong with my little question here because I think I'm done with them. I do see there's several other questions in the list, but my team either said we're good or I don't know if I got it right here. I'm having a little technical difficulty. So I will guess that we are done with the questions and think that we got there, or I missed something, and I'm sorry about that. We are at the top of the hour, a little earlier than I was expecting. I'll just make sure if I scroll through these questions and see. I like what Karen Bouchert said here. Sardine challenge, and see if I can do this on the live chat. I bet you, that's not gonna let me do it. Sardine challenges let you skip being hungry. You eat a can with 1 to 2 tablespoons of fat when you are hungry. It's very doable. Yes, that truly is what I was trying to say. When that fat is en route, when that fat is moving from your mouth, obviously through your intestines, but before it gets locked behind a fat cell, it's impressive how long they can go just saying, I just am not hungry. So yes. Let's see. My notes for where the questions come in I can't quite get it to work. So I'm looking at the questions in the chat right now, which is usually something my team helps me with, and seeing if there's anything. Can you do the sardine challenge if you're on a blood thinner? Yes, you can. It is part of what I love about that. The way this course runs is that we get to help answer questions specific to you. We take a really good history. We really know our students that are in class, and your stories help to teach everybody that's in the classroom. So we've just had amazing results. I have a couple people who said that they are down to 1 medication off of the 15 they were on the first time they took the class, and it's their goal. I don't know if they're going to get to their goal, but that this class, which will be the 3rd time they've taken it, is to reverse that final medication that they're taking. And whether or not it'll happen, I don't know, but I can't wait to have a front row seat and ask that question. All right. Let's see. So somebody says, do you rinse the oil off the sardines? Personally, what I do, and you'll see lots of folks put in some of their questions about this. They had, I take the can of sardines, and mine is in olive oil, and I put it over my dog's food, and then I put my own olive oil on top of the sardines, and I like the taste of it. I used to really have to put a little mayonnaise in it. I just put the olive oil on there and some salt and pepper, and I eat them right out of the can, and it works well. So yeah, actually my team just got that document working again, I'll answer this final questions. Are lipase supplements a mistake? So pancreatic enzymes are necessary for your body to break down fat. But what I find happening frequently is what happened with Jane. And that is their bowel isn't in shape for a high fat diet, and they give up too quickly. I don't know that you need to do it for 90 days, but if you remember Jane's story, she had oily stools, or stools that weren't what she wanted, didn't feel good for the first 30 days. So when I'm looking for upregulation of how well can you absorb fat in an insulin resistant patient, that is not uncommon for it to take a month. Unfortunately, people try to reach for these supplements like a lipase is an enzyme that helps you break down fat. Okay, if your body doesn't make them, period, yes, you need to take them. If you need to take them, don't buy them off of Amazon. Get them from your doctor, meaning there are some very specific components to those lipase enzymes that I would be, if it was my loved one, I would want them making sure that's the enzyme they got. But it's rare. It's not very common. I know they're super expensive. They're like $1,200 a month to get lipase enzymes for patients. But most of the time, it's not lipase enzymes they need. It was their bowel was not absorbing fat, and it takes time. And people don't like that. All right, another question. My questions are back to working again. Thanks, team. Have you ever heard of Alzheimer's referred to as type 3 diabetes? Have you ever heard of vinegar hack for lowering blood glucose spikes when eating carbs? Yes, both of those. So let's take the first one, Alzheimer's being type 3 diabetes. If you have ever seen me talk about, especially with the uric acid, where uric acid being a very big predictor for dementia. I have a really fun lecture that I don't think is aired yet. No, it hasn't come out yet, where I get to interview Rick Johnson, like the king of uric acid. And he, the first question I ask him is, why do people get demented? And I warned him at the beginning of this, like, I've watched several of your interviews, and I think you get to the good stuff at the end of the video. So we're going to start with the good stuff at the beginning of the video. And that was my opening question. So Alzheimer's being referred to type 3 diabetes is because that blood sugar is too high in their body and in their brain. In your body, you make a bunch of fat cells. In your brain, you turn it into fructose and then into uric acid in your brain. And it's a huge predictor for dementia. So yes, it is on that spectrum of too high of blood sugar for too long. And how does it age that part of the body? In the brain, we call it dementia, and Alzheimer's is one of those. And then the vinegar for lowering glucose, it's a hack, but it does work. When you, I didn't believe it. And then I have my continuous glucose monitor on, and I did it. And sure enough, it was less. My blood sugars were less. So it's something about the breakdown of, like, the acidity helps to break down the carbs, or they get absorbed at a slower pace because of the way you break them down when you have vinegar. Anyway, last question, and then we'll be done for the night. I really appreciate all of you that stuck around for that. I love this topic, and I think that you shouldn't be afraid. I know that for several times when talking about Jane's story, I've said to my husband, I should just do that. I should just do sardines for from now until the end of the course. It would just be easier. We don't have kids in the house anymore, so he's worried I might follow through with it. I mean, I'll put nutritious food on the table for the kids, but, oh, Chad, you and I can just eat sardines. He's serious. He's worried I'm serious. I'm kind of serious. Last one. When you refer to high insulin levels, are you referring to insulin resistance? Yeah. So over time, when the insulin levels go up higher and higher, it's taking more and more and more of that signal of insulin to get glucose inside. When insulin has been high for so long, the first place to become resistant is the fat cell. So even though you lower the insulin, you've gotten, you stop eating carbs, and people feel much better on a ketogenic diet, and they make ketones, the fat cell is going to be difficult to let go of its resources. And that is one of the consequences of being insulin resistant. So if you go back again to look at those initial pictures of Jane before she started the ketogenic diet, here, I'll show you this. Oopsie, let's try that again. Here's pictures of her before she started the ketogenic diet, very insulin resistant, putting that weight on in her middle. And you can see she's swollen in every part of her. You go to what she looks like after 90 days of of only sardines, and you say, man, you win, Jane. That's awesome. Not only does she look healthy, this is a picture from the car today. So I said, I'm just going to use it because you look great. She does not look swollen. She has lost 35 pounds, and by golly, she is going to be the best coach. Well, she's got good competition for some other coaches, but I would be so proud to be a student in her classroom. So yes, congratulations, Jane. You have taught all of us. I hope that many of you considering what is it that I could do to get out of the slump that I'm in. This is an option, and you can do that with the security and safety of knowing that 90 days she ate 4 cans of sardines, and at the end these were her results. I hope you learned something. We'll see you next week, everybody, and join our class by Friday if you're interested. We'd love to have you as